Okay, this is Sydney, and I am presenting part two of mine and Ashley's disability presentation on visual impairment. So, students with a visual impairment have the same range of intellectual abilities as other students. That being said, these students may require accommodations to ensure that they have an equal opportunity to succeed. Some of these examples include more time to complete assignments and take tests, abbreviated homework assignments, which include all of the concepts that the student's been learning, just fewer items per concept, and then allow students to use different materials such as a bold marker or raised paper to complete assignments. So when a student has a visual impairment, they may require additional time to complete assignments and exams. The student may read slower, become visually fatigued quicker, or take more time because of the tools that he or she uses for reading and writing. For instance, some tools that students may use are Braille or Braille Writer, low vision devices, or audio devices. These tools each help the student to complete his or her work, yet often take significantly more time than simply reading through the questions and writing the answers. So as you can imagine, allowing these students some additional time to complete their work is very beneficial to them. Abbreviated homework assignments are not easier than normal homework assignments. They are of the same skill level, however, abbreviated homework assignments are shorter in length. So instead of asking 4 questions per concept, an abbreviated homework assignment may only ask 2 questions per concept. This allows the student with a visual impairment to work through the assignment at their own pace and minimizes the risk of the student becoming visually fatigued or bogged down. Another great resource for students with visual impairment is alternative materials. So two of these examples are raised line paper, which provides a tactile guide to help students write within the lines. So this paper has several raised lines that help the student write with tactile cues. So as the student's writing, they can feel the paper, the raised lines in the paper, and that's going to help them know whether or not they're writing in straight lines and if they're getting their work the correct way on the paper. And then bold markers and low vision pens are also really great for students who have low vision impairment. So bold markers are a great material to use in completing assignments and projects because the thick marker will help the student to better see what he or she is writing on the paper. So these are just two of the many tools that can be provided for these students to help them do their work. It is important that the classroom is set up in a functional way. The student will need easy access to commonly used areas of the class as well as commonly used supplies. They need to have a sense of where they are in relation to other objects and people in the environment and the ability to move around. So they need to know important areas such as location of doorways, bookshelves, the teacher's desk, where are their materials that they're going to be using, those sorts of things. And then consistency and organization is another really great thing to think about. And then adequate and appropriate lighting. So for location, the student needs to understand the location of important areas. Some will use a white-tipped cane for guidance to help locate these areas, but it is extremely important that they know. They need to know, okay, where are, my textbooks that I need to use for whatever they're doing that day, or where are the supplies that I need for this project, where is my teacher's desk if I need to go ask him or her a question, where's the doorway, how do I get out of the classroom. So these are some really great things to think about and letting these students know how to manage their way around the classroom. And then consistency and organization is very important for these students. So when organizing the classroom, think smart and be consistent. Leave ample walking room between desks, keep common areas the same, and ensure that materials can be easily accessed. Don't regularly change the organization of the classroom, and make note to the student of any necessary changes. So if there really was a change that needed to be made, you as the teacher, you need to let that student know, hey, this is no longer in this area of the classroom. I've moved it to this area. I'm gonna remind you until you remember, and really help to guide that student into becoming reacquainted with whatever it is that changed. And then adequate lighting. So the student with a low visual impairment needs to have proper lighting that reduces glare and enhances contrast. As for academic learning, learning in schools relies heavily on vision, and students with a visual impairment can suffer academically without proper accommodations and guidance. So think about reading a textbook. We use our sight to read the words on the page, look at the graphics, and skim through the chapters, right? So this next slide, we have two pictures, and we can clearly see, at least I can with my glasses on, the picture on the left, and we can see that it says the word design in a bunch of different sizes and fonts. And then the picture on the right side of the screen is blurry, at least it is for me. I can see some of the bigger words, the bigger fonts, that it still says the word design, but some of the smaller fonts, if I didn't know what it said, wouldn't be able to tell you. So this is just kind of a little way for us to see, reading from a textbook is not going to be the same for a student with a visual impairment. So it's not going to be as easy for them, basically, as it is for us to simply just open our textbook and start reading. They're going to need these accommodations that we're talking about. So like I mentioned, the student with the visual impairment is not going to learn the same way from a textbook that we do. They may use a magnifying glass or listen to an audiobook version, and these can make it difficult to quickly skim over pages to check for understanding or reread a section that didn't make, they didn't maybe quite grasp. And because that's something that I personally do often. If I didn't really understand something I read, well, I'm just going to go back and, depending on the length of it, reread it or skim through it and see what I missed. So that is a little more difficult for these students, but with accommodations and modifications and the help of the teacher and peers, students with visual impairment can succeed academically. There's no doubt about that. As for social learning, it is important that teachers monitor students' social learning and facilitate opportunities for all students to interact with each other in a positive way. For students who are visually impaired, teachers should identify peers by name, teach self-advocacy skills, and facilitate independent and group work. So especially identifying peers by name, this is something that's really important for these students. Whenever you as the teacher are referring to any of the other students in the class or calling on any of the students, you need to make sure that you're saying that student's name so that your visually impaired student can also become acquainted with that person, what their name is, and kind of in their own way match their name to their voice. So as with all students, students who are visually impaired vary in social and emotional development. These students may find it difficult to make new friends, interact appropriately with peers, and develop a positive self-concept. The teacher should guide these students in learning social norms, such as keeping a proper social distance, facing a person when speaking to them, and taking turns. So these are just some great examples of things, especially for our younger grades. These are the times that students are learning through what their peers are doing and what their teacher is doing. They're learning how to keep appropriate social distance, that when you're talking to someone, making eye contact with them, or at least facing that person when you're talking to them is what you need to be doing. And then things like taking turns that children learn at a very young age. These are some things that really need to be emphasized because your students who are visually impaired may not be catching these things, and they may not be learning through modeling like the other students are doing. And it's also important to note that students who are visually impaired may not catch confused facial expressions, and they'll just continue to interact normally. So if you're having a conversation, if the student's having a conversation with a peer and they say something that maybe confuses their peer, and their peer makes a confused face, then they might not be able to pick up on that. And they're just going to continue talking as if nothing happened, while their peer is like, whoa, wait, what? Back up a second. So these are that's just something to keep in mind with these students, and something to remind the students' peers of too, to be vocal with they're visually impaired students. And this is our list of references where we got our information for this presentation, and you can check out our little page on helpful tips for teachers and print that out, keep it, do whatever you want with it. But anyways, that is it. Thank you for watching and listening to our presentation.